Back in 1903, deep in Clifton, there used to be an asylum buried deep within the wilderness of Clifton. Pretty soon after the Civil War, people started inhabiting the area. Population-wise, around 300 or so. It was a very small town. Nonetheless, people didn't like the idea of having an asylum miles down the road. So they all got together and signed a petition for the asylum to relocate elsewhere. The petition passed, and a new asylum was built, which is now known as Lorton Prison, a temporary facility for convicts to stay in until they are appropriately sentenced. In the autumn of 1904, the convicts were gathered and piled into the bus, used to transport them to Lorton. Somewhere during the drive, not too far from where they left, the driver had swerved to avoid something, and the bus had started to tip, and soon was rolling in a terrible collision course. Most of the convicts were injured, but managed to escape the bus, and had fled into the night, towards the woods. The next morning, a local police investigation had begun, and they begun rounding up the escaped convicts. Hours turned into days, days into weeks, weeks into months. Everyone was recovered after 4 months, except for 2 people, named Marcus A. Walster and Douglas G. Griffin. During the search for both men, the police found dead rabbits, all of them half-eaten and dismembered, every now and then along their search. Finally, they were to find Marcus dead by the Fairfax Station Bridge, now known as Bunnyman's Bridge. In his hand, he held a man-made hammer/knife like a tool, made with a sharp rock and a sturdy branch as a handle. They thought nothing of it, and didn't care how he died, only that he was apprehended and they no longer had to worry about him. They had a name for Marcus, but later on they realized they had named the wrong person the Bunnyman. Still searching for Douglas, they kept on finding half-dead rabbits every so often while the search went on. Eventually, they were to name Douglas the Bunnyman from now on. Months passed by, and the police gave up on their search. Everybody assumed the Bunnyman was dead by now, if not gone, so they went on with their small-town lives. Come October, people started seeing dead bunnies reappearing out of the blue, and started to fear the unseen. Halloween night came around, and as usual, a bunch of kids had gone down to the bridge that night to drink and do whatever kids their age in the early 20th century did. Midnight came around within minutes, and most of the kids had left. Only 3 of them remained at the bridge. Exactly at midnight, a bright light came from the bridge, right where the kids were. A few seconds later, they were all dead, throats slashed with that same type of tool that was found next to the other escapee, Marcus. Not only were their throats slashed, but they were cut up and down their chests, gutted like fish. The Bunnyman then hung both the boys from one end of a bridge, with rope around their necks, hanging from the overpass with their legs dangling in view of any passing cars. The girl was hung the same way, on the other side of the bridge. This happened on Halloween in 1905. After that, they didn't see or hear anything from him for another year. Halloween 1906 was approaching, and parents as well as the teens in Clifton still remember the incident that occurred 1 year ago at the bridge. His bridge. The Bunnyman's Bridge. That night, 7 teens were left, remaining right before midnight at the bridge. Thinking little of it, 6 remained inside the bridge while one, Adrian Hatala, had remained a good distance from the bridge, hoping to have enough time to escape if the same thing happened again. She was the only one to witness this. A dim light walking the railroad track just before midnight stopped right above the bridge at midnight, then disappeared at the same time that a bright light flash was inside the bridge. She heard the deafening sounds of a terrified screaming coming from inside the bridge that lasted only seconds. Moments later, they were all hung from the end of the bridge, in the same way as the corpses a year earlier. Horrified, she ran home and refused to tell of what she saw, just spattered words mixed with incoherent mumbling that the people of their town had to put together to come up with their story. No one understood it or believed her. They charged her with the teen's murders and locked her up in the asylum of Lorton. In 1913, the same thing happened, with 9 teenagers this time, on a Halloween night once again. Adrienne was still locked up. They dropped her sentence, but it was too late. The insanity had finally conquered her. Even if she was released, she was far too gone to have a life. So she spent her remaining years in the asylum until she finally died in 1953 of reported shock. No one knows exactly what she died from shock from, but supposedly she had died in her sleep, dreaming of what had happened that dreaded night. Perhaps the Bunnyman had finally gotten her. More murders were to take place, however. Although, after the murders in 1913, most people stayed clear of the bridge on Halloween. 1943 rolls around, and 6 teenagers go strolling out on Halloween night. A couple hours later, all of them dead. Same way as all the others. Investigations took place, but as usual, nothing was discovered. 1976. The same situation occurs, this time with only 3 people. The only other incident that occurred since then was in 1987, 12 years ago. Janet Chartelier was enjoying the night with her 4 friends. Halloween night had finally come, and they had gone driving out to enjoy the night after invading the children's candy bags. They had settled around 11 p.m. at the bridge, waiting for midnight to come. They didn't believe in the myth, so they decided to see it for themselves, and were to be the only ones who actually withstood the Bunnyman. They had waited around an hour or so it was nearly midnight, when Janet started getting a little scared. They all had been pulling pranks on each other, jumping out of the bushes and screaming, so she was already a little worked up. Midnight hits, and by this stage, she's in total panic. She's almost out on the bridge when the lights get really bright inside. When that happens, her body is halfway outside of the bridge. She sees her skin start tearing at her chest, but nothing is piercing her skin. She manages finally to leave the bridge, completely horrified. She hits a hanging body and knocks herself out. When she awakens, she discovers that she has been bleeding. She was lucky that the cut had just started and wasn't very bad at all. She left and never returned to the bridge again. She had been sitting on a swinging bench on her balcony every morning, just staring in the direction toward the bridge a couple miles down. From then on, the story remains untouched and unmoved.